does.
He wins the gunfight!
Oh
Oh my
my
god, he
God.
won the
Oh!
gunfight!
For the 2015. That's why he got dropped. Out. 7 seconds.
Look at that! Karma! The Karma for Big T!
Nate is
Going to the defuse. Where is Miracles? Oh,
I did it!
He's gonna
Go
give
for
it!
the toss.
He's gonna give it! Shadow will win!
Oh my god.
What is going on, guys? My name is Len, and today I'm bringing you guys another video, and for today we are talking about map vetoes. And before we even hop into that topic, I know everyone's probably a little bit, you're probably not curious whatsoever, but hey, I haven't really made a video in a long time. For those who haven't really realized that, I'm sure it's probably been maybe close to like 3 weeks. I have been busy and stuff like that. If there's a topic that I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about it regardless. So I'm really passionate about this topic of map vetoes and fully expect videos to slowly start coming back. This is going to be a series on my channel that I'm going to be doing regarding every single topic that I talk about called First Blood. I think it's a kind of a cool name for the show. It's a cool name for the topic. It really doesn't change anything. I made some new graphics and stuff for the show to make it look a little bit nicer, more professional as well, to give you guys a little bit more of a studio base to it. But First Blood, it's like, you know, one of the first people. I want to be one of the first people to talk about certain topics and stuff. It's also a Call of Duty reference, and I think it works pretty well. It's really just the name of the entire show that I'm going to be doing. You know, First Blood, topic, name, you know, whatever you can kind of throw out there. So for this episode, First Blood, episode 1, map vetoes. There we go. Got it under lock. For those who don't know what map vetoes are, essentially it is a map system that you put into a game, or you can put outside the game. We did it back in Ghost around Season 3 playoffs time, I believe. And essentially what it is that each side gets a chance to veto or ban, if you want to be, you know, Call of Duty references, picking bans. It gives you a chance to take out a map that you're not comfortable with, or a map that you think versus this particular team that they could beat you on. So essentially your whole goal of this veto system is to make this whole map pool that you're playing on a lot better for yourself. Of course, that's the whole point of playing esports in general, is because you want to have an advantage over the opposition heading into a game. So with that in mind, this doesn't happen just in Call of Duty, or didn't just happen in Call of Duty at a time back in Ghost around the Season 3 playoffs time, like I mentioned. It happens in other stuff as well. Like we talk about the picks and bans, we talk about the ban and protect system. It's involved in other esports regarding around champ select, you know, and anything really. We have the ban and protect system. That's fantastic. But when it comes down to maps, when it comes down to map vetoes, it's also involved with something like CS:GO. If you guys haven't watched CS:GO in the past, you know, turn on a tournament, you'll be able to see that map veto process where, you know, a certain map, you know, is kind of listed in the pool. You ban one, the other team bans one, and then randomly it is drawn between which maps you're going to play on. But the reason why I want to talk about this map veto system, because it is kind of a hot topic right now going in the Call of Duty scene. I think I just saw Deserto post a little bit of an article about it. I didn't read too much into it because I already had an opinion. I've had actually this document that I'm looking at of certain, you know, notes that I want to cover. I've had this for at least like 4 or 5 months, like ever since like after a couple, I think after like University of South Carolina, like the week after that tournament happened, I was like, we need map vetoes. I'm gonna make a video about map vetoes, and I kind of just neglected it. And I ended up like, just going through Google Docs a minute ago and realizing, well, I have a full document that I could talk about for a video. And so in that, it's kind of become a hot topic as of recent because players are kind of bringing it up. I know European players have been kind of being more vocal about it than anyone else has, because there are positives and negatives to both. You know, there's positives and negatives to everything that you bring up, you know, especially esports related, where it's, you know, such a young thing that you want to make sure that you tailor it correctly. So, like I said, we're going to talk about why it should, why it shouldn't, and then I'll give my opinion at the end. So we can kind of obviously talk about some major topics, and this was, I believe, a Reddit post is where I'm getting some of these things. I'm not going to give my particular feel on the entire thing, but some of the topics that I'm bringing up from which other side, some of them come from Reddit. So this isn't just my opinion. It's opinions from you guys. It's opinions from people of Reddit, of the COD competitive Reddit, which I'll link down below. I might even link the article if I have time to do that. So let's go and talk about first why it should. Why should map vetoes make a return into Call of Duty? And the first point I want to bring up, it makes overall the game way more in depth, which I think is perfect. I mean, you don't want to have a game like Call of Duty where it's, you know, you're focusing too much time, and that's obviously negative. So I'll mention that. But to make it more in depth, I think is a positive thing. I really do. I think, you know, when it comes down to Call of Duty, the more depth, the better. I mean, what you can talk about, we can have analysts, the analysts that we do have, like at MLG Anaheim, for example, you had some pro players up there who did a fantastic job from what I was able to watch. You know, being able to have them, be able to have, you know, people who study the game, such as myself, and to know what maps work for certain teams. This is the strategy behind why this team is banning this particular map, and making us more similar to other esports, I think is fantastic. So the more in depth, I think, the greater, to be completely honest with you. Point number 2, there's 5 points for each. Point number 2, why it should, forces other teams to know more about who they play. I think that's a really good reason, to be completely honest. Knowing more about your opponent. It's not just in-game. It's not really knowing, oh, do they have their specialists? Do they have their streaks? So on and so forth. It's knowing your opponent, who you're coming up against. You know, what are they good at in this particular strategy? It's like, you know, we play hardpoint, oh, this team's really good at rotating. This team's really good at winning their gunfights. No, like that's great to know, and it's honestly, it's a true fact, but it's so stale to say, well, no, this team's good on this map for this particular reason. We need to ban this map out. We need to obviously make sure that this map's going to make it through because we're much better than them on this map for this particular reason. That's where analysts come in. That's also where it comes down to team comp, when it comes down to maybe even team analysts, team coaches, players who have a wide variety of knowledge when it comes down to the teams that they're playing against. Knowing your enemy is incredibly important. I think this really could definitely help it. Now for note number 3, it says takes away randomness of already assigned maps, which I think probably out of all of the topics I'm talking about before why it should, this is my favorite, because randomness in esports just don't mix. It does not work because you want to have the most competitive thing possible. You want to make sure that, you know what, people look back at a series, when they look at a particular game, you have players saying, oh, it's connection, oh, it's this particular reason, it was the randomness of this happening, it was the gunfight that I should have won because of hosts. We have all the internet problems, which already make the game random enough because, you know what, hosting and stuff, is this player going to be good today? Is this player going to be bad tomorrow? Like, the randomness for me in Call of Duty is absolutely terrible, and I hate randomness in general in esports. Even CSGO, for example, as mentioned, there's a little bit of randomness when it comes down to their veto system. But when it comes down to whatever system, and I honestly have no idea, I really should ask, when you go to a UMG event, when you go to an MLG event, we get handed a paper, the casters do, you get handed a paper that says, here are the maps for whatever, losers round 2, losers round 3. I don't know personally how those get assigned, whether it's just, pick of the draw, you have stronghold hardpoint, then you have evac search and destroy. Like, I don't know how you go through that. Of course, they're gonna have the maps vary. So there's some system that they use, and I'm honestly not sure exactly what it is. But that little bit of randomness, not even the people who are assigning that, because they probably have no idea, what the groups are gonna be or anything like that. But just the randomness that comes into that, one person's choice, the computer's choice to randomly assign a certain thing. If Optic Gaming and Rise are playing against one another, and then you have a number of different maps that are in favor of Optic, or a number of different maps that are in favor of Rise, and they have no decision over that. Well, the whole randomness of the series can debate who wins that game, which is terrible. Like, it's the exact opposite of what you want. You want to make sure that when these two teams go up against each other, not just these two, but all series in general, but in particular, the two best teams in the game, considerably, you could throw other teams in there as well. But when it comes down to those two teams heading against each other, you want to make sure that that matchup is legit as possible. Like, there's no outside things that could have potentially changed what went down in that series. Number 4, eliminates fluky maps. Things like evac hardpoint, things like Stronghold CTF. Stronghold CTF is probably the number 1 map right now that I'm personally not a fan of at all, of casting, watching, playing. I mean, I play a little bit, and I'm sure pros can even speak about certain maps that they don't like having either. And if the system is put in play, we could potentially see teams maybe just eliminate that from the rotation in general, or hey guys, don't even think about banning or protecting this particular map. Player agreements that we have, and the number of different things for the competitive rotation for Call of Duty, around trip mines and whatever, shock charges, whatever you want to kind of throw out there. Map vetoes could also be in that particular thing, because guys, no one wants to play Stronghold CTF. No one likes that map. Let's just not ban it, and let's just, focus on something else that we want to, obviously take out of the game. Let's not even worry about having that in this match. But better that than having another random spawn, another game where you're going to see super slow gameplay. When it comes down to Stronghold CTF, it kind of depends. Like, I've casted really fast Stronghold CTF maps, but that's like 10% of the time. 90% of the time when you're casting Stronghold CTF, or even you're playing CTF, it's that fact of, moving up the map incredibly slowly. It's not really how Black Ops 3, not that it's not meant to be played, because you make it how it's meant to be played. But so to me, eliminate fluky maps, I totally agree with that. I think that's a really good point to bring up, and how the system can benefit us. And the last point that I want to talk about why it should potentially be a thing of Call of Duty, again, the map veto system, is the system has a good track record. Every time that we've talked about the map veto system, even from Ghost, like, there wasn't anyone saying, oh my gosh, this is a terrible thing, we don't need to have this in the game. I don't think we ever saw any complaints about it. It was just that, oh, the system's gone now, Advanced Warfare is here, we're going to move on. Like, I never heard anyone say, oh, the system has a system of randomness. If anything, it cuts down the randomness. When it comes into certain maps, how many maps you choose, how many maps are in the pool, it can still provide that, but at least it provides more competition in the entire realm of things. So in general, the system has a good track record. It's not like we're choosing a system that, could be good or could be bad. If anything, it's going to improve it for the most part. It's just, the idea of wanting to add it in, and all of the, the why it shouldn't is why it's going to be coming up. So the system has a good track record. I think that's important to note. And that's the last reason of why it should be implemented in Call of Duty. Now let's talk about the reason why it shouldn't. After I list the points of why it shouldn't, there might be a little bit of variation of why I talked about more than another, and you'll obviously realize that, in my opinion, toward the end. So the first point, why it makes it incredibly stale for viewership. Do you really want to to see evac hardpoint, evac search and destroy, evac uplink. You want to see all those maps continually playing one after another. And when Call of Duty is trying to grow its viewership, is it really that good of an idea to make sure that we're playing the same map over and over and over again? I think, there's like, I'm trying to look at the maps that we have right now for Call of Duty. We have breach hardpoint, we have breach search and destroy, and breach uplink. We have evac and hardpoint search and destroy and uplink. We have fringe and hardpoint search and destroy and uplink. So you want to see the same 3 maps over and over and over again. I didn't mention in CTF too, breach, evac, and fringe are mentioned there also. So, I mean, granted, you want to see those 3 maps be played every single series? Probably not. I mean, honestly, you want to see a little bit of variation. You want to see some maps that you're looking forward to watching rather than breach, evac, or fringe. Of course, you're going to get a little bit of variation here and there, but that was the main problem with the Ghost system that people kind of talked about, was that, I'm tired of seeing freight in every single game type. It was just a really good map. It worked for the competitive scene, but it does get stale after a time, and it can at times be overplayed. Point number 2 of why it shouldn't: teams don't have to be good at all maps, meaning that they are not truly the best in the entire game. Now, I can see where this person who made this particular argument is coming from, because granted, in a perfect world, right, in Call of Duty, if you're not good at every aspect of the game, if you're not good at hardpoint, if you're not good at search and destroy, if you're not good at uplink or CTF in some regard, then you're not the best in the game. Debating on what games you're better at than others. If your search and destroy game is good and you're also good at a respawn, then most likely you're a pretty good Call of Duty team when it comes down to the entire spectrum of things. Why? Because you're good at 3, or technically 2 out of the 4 game types, but 3 overall maps or, game types in a best of 5. And I want to come back to this one to talk about once my opinion comes up, because I have a very, very incredibly big argument when it comes down to this. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But next point that I'm going to talk about is would take way too long with the specialist draft and the bend and protect system already. Now, granted, when it comes down to the map veto system, it can take some time. Granted, if you have all these maps lined up, if you're the team captain or however this kind of works, you're starting to draw out, what maps we don't want to have, what maps we do want to have, what maps they are. It's like a game of chess, right? Because this person makes a move. Now, how do we react to this move? Like, do they have too strong of a hardpoint map for them? So we should focus on our search and destroy map, or should we focus more on more of our uplink and TTF game types because we're really good at search and destroy? Like, there's a lot of strategies that'll come into it, so it's going to take some time, and we already know the casters and everything. It takes some time to get the specialist strategy. It takes some time to get the band and protects underway, because why? Each player gets a minimum of 30 seconds, unless they pick that before, and usually that does happen. There's a 30 seconds, then they have the time to create their class, then they pick their specialist strat, and then they do the score streaks, then they have the full 90 seconds like I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of time that goes down into those particular, choicing things. Would adding the map vetoes before that, I mean, each series could last, that could add a good 10-15 minutes onto the front of it in general when it comes down to it. Explorers got to get back at the boost, they still got to get warm. Is that really good? Are we focusing too much on each particular series to the point where we're waiting, hours to watch this game? It's like, I saw someone bring up a good point on Reddit, and they're like, you know what? Is it really worth it to have map vetoes go on? That's going to take an extra, 10-15 minutes before the map starts. Maybe even not 10 minutes. I'd say 10 minutes and a minimum, or and a maximum, I guess you could say. 10 minutes maximum. Then we have the bend and protect and the special strat. That takes a few minutes as well. And then we have evac. Like, is it really worth it to have all that stuff happen? Like, you're literally wasting so much time. And I can totally see where that person's coming from. So that's obviously something to kind of keep in mind when it comes down to the veto system. Veto system could be flawed with 4 game types. Still has a little bit of randomness. System's not perfect. Everyone knows that, and I can obviously kind of keep that in mind as well when we talk about it. But with 4 game types, it does make it a little bit difficult, because it's not, because as it works right now, for those who don't know, the current maps, I believe we had 4 hardpoint maps, 4 uplink maps, 4 CTF maps, and 7 search and destroy maps. That might be wrong in search and destroy. I'm pretty sure we have 7. So essentially, is it the perfect system? No, because a perfect system probably doesn't exist out there. And it works well if we had the Ghost system where there's only 3 game types, because why? You had 4 DOM maps, right? You had 4 DOM maps. You would take out one, the other team would take out another. One DOM map was placed in game type number 1, is also placed in that 4th spot. Why would search and destroy work? Because why? You have the place in that 2nd spot, and you have that part in the 5th spot as well. So there is still some randomness. So is the system that we're implementing really worth it if in the long run, it's still not perfect, so why should we add it in the long run? It could just only provide a little bit more negative to the scene, rather, and that's definitely a good point to kind of bring up. And the last point that I have for why it shouldn't, maps could also become gentlemen's agreements. And I talked about that and why it should, and why that's also a positive thing. Well, can you also kind of spin it in a negative light? Because, granted, we cannot play Stronghold CTF. Players could agree, this is a fluky map, let's not play it. But it also going to hurt the Call of Duty scene, because now we're focusing on, 3 maps? Like, that's the whole thing with me when it comes down to why it shouldn't, is that there are so many reasons, and little particular reasons of why we shouldn't, because it hurts the viewership. It hurts what players are watching. This is also going to kind of lead into my opinion on the matter. We can kind of talk about it now. I think it should. I think that map vetoes should return. And I have a pretty strong opinion about that because I've talked about the reasons why it shouldn't. I've talked about the reasons why it should. The reasons why I said it shouldn't, and I use this, to be like, devil's advocate kind of situation, saying and bringing up points that I think are definitely good to mention. But in the long run, these are all like little pity things that you can kind of bring up. It makes it incredibly still for viewership. Well, granted, this we're not catering the entire game to viewership. Granted, it should be fun to watch. If anything, if what viewership would want is that every other team besides Optic Gaming plays a best of one, because why? We don't have time to watch them play. We don't watch Optic Gaming all the time. We have an Optic Cam. We want to have a B stream where we're following around Optic Gaming with cameras like this. So to try and make the game as cater to viewership isn't a bad idea, but in the long run, if we keep using that excuse, we're just going to be making the game what viewers want rather than as competitive as it possibly can be, which can include to randomness and can include to a number of different things. Another reason why I said it shouldn't, teams don't have to be good at all maps, meaning that they are not the best. That's not true at all. That's a thing that I understand where they're coming from in that particular argument. I understand what you're saying in that thing, but listen to me here. Teams don't have to be good at every single map. Not really, because if you're facing off and you have the veto system in play, you know what? Stronghold CTF, we're not good at playing slow. I keep using Stronghold CTF. Let's just use Infection Uplink, right? We're not good at ARs. We don't really have too many strong ARs on the team. We have one really good guy with an AR, but for the most part, we're SMG preferred players. So let's try and get rid of Infection Uplink. Well, no, you're not good at every single map. So we need to develop this guy as more of an AR player. We need to make sure that we have every single map veto. We don't care what map we play. No, that's not the whole point in playing Call of Duty. Your whole point is to be better at something than someone else. That's the reason why certain teams thrive in this game, because they're good at slaying, they're good at hardpoint, they're good at uplink, they're good at search and destroy, they're good at some game types, but they're not going to be great at every single one, because if they were, then every match would be like a stalemate. Every match would be a tied game. We've been having constant overtimes when it comes down to uplinks and CTFs and so on and so forth. Not every team is going to be good at everything, and that's the same thing when it comes down to maps, because playstyles work differently on different maps. Like I said, on Infection, you're going to be rocking a lot of ARs. On Evac, you're running a lot of subs. Like I said, it goes back and forth between teams and so on and so forth. You're not going to develop one player who's primarily and only good with a sub. You can't put an AR in his hands and expect him to have good results. And granted, in a perfect world, he would be good at every single weapon. That every player in Call of Duty would be the exact same skill. It's like what we're kind of leading into here. But that's never going to be the case. So to say that teams had to be good at every single map, I understand that argument and I understand where you're coming from. But in the whole spectrum of things, it just doesn't work out for certain players. Like their whole career of playing Call of Duty for the last 6-7 years, maybe even a little bit under that, is the fact that they're really good at one particular playstyle. They're good with one particular weapon, an AR and an SMG, maybe even a sniper rifle at times. And that's why we have the banner protects in the first place, because teams don't like using certain things because they may not be good with it. Let's get rid of the Man of War on Evac, because granted, they're a really good AR team. If we're gonna use that argument, then the banner protect shouldn't be a thing, because you should be good at every single weapon. You should be good at every single tool to get rid of certain things and counter each other. And I talk about the gentleman's agreements, and honestly, I think, and I don't like that whole argument, but it is kind of sad that in Call of Duty, players do have to form gentleman's agreements. Like, let's not use this. Let's agree that the competitive, style that they have regarding maps, regarding, certain tools, specialists, whatever it may be, let's agree that we don't use certain things. I think while it is unfortunate, it's not the player's fault. It's not like, oh, hey guys, let's come together and let's, say, screw Call of Duty. Let's not do what they want us to do. No, they're trying to make it as competitive as possible, and it's a really sad thing that players have to dictate how that works rather than the game itself who's developing it all. So, in my opinion, I want to know your guys' opinions as well. Let's continue this conversation down in the comments. Should map vetoes return for Call of Duty? Because, of course, it was a thing back in Ghost. I think it worked pretty well. I don't think we really had anyone step out and say, oh, this is a bad thing, this is a terrible thing. But there are some negatives that come from it. There's negatives from everything that you can implement in Call of Duty. Would it take too long for matches to start? I think all of those arguments are mostly cosmetic things, which in the long run, you can change. Like you said, you have a little bit of commercial breaks, maybe even commercial breaks. You see the map veto process, so on and so forth. And I think it adds more depth to the game, which I personally love, being a Call of Duty fan, being a Call of Duty esports fan, being someone who studies these teams and kind of watches them. So I hope you guys did enjoy this episode. And if you did, of course, make sure to leave a like and also make sure to subscribe for future content. Really do appreciate the amount of support that we've even gotten, or that I've gotten, even though we haven't been making videos as consistently as I would like. But of course, the videos will return. I'll be making topic videos constantly. And like I said, let's continue this conversation down in the comments. Should map vetoes return to Call of Duty? Give your opinion why yes, and give your opinion why you think it shouldn't. And that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And again, I will see you all later. Have a fantastic day. And until next time, peace.